Oh, do it.
I'm Matt Leising, and you're watching this Break It Down show.
That's right, the Break It Down show. We always bring you incredible people doing really incredible things, and Matt is no different. Matt and I have a similar lifespan, and so we'll have a lot of be able to have a lot of conversations based upon our own remembered experiences from down the road. We were just talking off camera about the doom, the end of Bitcoin, for example, and because there's scandals and the market is chaotic in an early stage of a product, and Bitcoin just really not been around that long. I bought some a while back, and I started really getting interested, Matt, in right around 2016, 17. I had a show called Popping the Bubble, and we were getting into cryptocurrencies, blockchain, all of these different aspects of it. And the market has only become more strong, more stable, chaotic, sure, but you have to expect that in an early stage of something like a currency or something that is a global scale transfer of value.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for having me on the show, Pete. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be here. I think, as somebody put it to me the other day, the people who are attracted to crypto, for the most part, I'd say maybe 80%, are people who have dollar signs in their eyes and have absolutely no idea about risk management. So, they're here for a quick buck. They're doing all the crazy yield farming and expecting 20%, return on something when interest rates are, sub 1%. You're going to get those folks, and they're going to get blown out. They should know that they're risking everything. You should know by now that you should not be leaving your money on FTX or any exchange for that matter. You should be in control of your own coins, and that's been out there for years. I've been saying this for years, and I'm not alone. Then there's the other 20% of the people out there who are building stuff and are making this a reality because they see it as a really important alternative to the current systems we have, whether it's in how music is made and music companies make money off of artists, or whether it's global payments, or it's decentralized finance. It's all these things that are blossoming here, even though we're in a pretty bad bear market, and there's a lot to be really upset about and concerned about where scammers are taking advantage of people. The building is still going on, and it's, I think, like you said, to me, it's stronger than ever.
There's a lot to talk about within this paradigm. So the other day, I bought someone some groceries, and they said, "Hey, here, how much did that cost?" I'm like, "Oh, it's $50." And so instead of giving me electronic money, they gave me cash, which I now have to convert back into electronic money. Now, we would call this money Citibank or Bank of America, but in reality, I'm just trying to get it back into digits as soon as I can. And that's really, in a lot of ways, and I'm simplifying, but that is what like Ethereum and IOTA and all these different things are. It's a more efficient and more specific digital form of, and again, not just money, but value exchange.
Yeah, for sure. And for that sort of thing, that's why I think stablecoins are such an interesting proposition, and will be, I think, a core part of this ecosystem, because I don't really want to hold my money in Ether, like it's too volatile still. Like
Right.
I'll put it into US dollar coin or something like that. So, that's important. And I think that needs to be regulated. I think Congress is on the right track with like signaling that they're going to go that direction first, because I think that is one of the more powerful pieces of the crypto puzzle that's emerged. I love Ether for everything else that you can do with it, but I don't like it as a currency. I'm the same with Bitcoin. I would not be holding Bitcoin as a currency either. I'd be holding it as an investment. But if I'm going to be using digital money on a daily basis, I want to have it in a stable coin. So I think that's what's fascinating about this space in general, is that there are all these things that it's remaking in like a peer-to-peer kind of fashion or image, that it's just like, you never really thought about it before, but like, why should it take 3 days to clear a check? Like why can't that be instantaneous? And
Oh my
so,
gosh, this is great. This is great.
so, yeah, I'm with you on that.
So I want to get back to, and don't let me forget to get back to what does it take 3 days to clear a check. But I want to slide over to the left a little bit and talk about brands and familiarization and defending something, even if it's not in your best interest, because you create a loyalty right within yourself. So I was having this conversation with my nieces last night. We're talking about finances, and I said, "You guys both use Google, right?" And they're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Why don't you use Bing?" And they're like, "Because Bing is dumb." And I'm like, "Bing pays you to use it. It's a digital currency. It's more valuable if you exchange it with Microsoft, but at REI, you'll get 75% of that dollar, let's say. And this is just for doing the internet.
Mhm.
on Bing as your home. And it's like remarkable that you can do this and that they'll exchange value. But this is sort of like, this is a good example, I feel, of one, cryptocurrency and how these things work, and they're exchanging value to me. Hey, your attention, your presence on our platform, your consumption are valuable. Yeah, I wish they'd be more valuable, but here they are. Here's where I get value. So I can make, let's say, $150 a year if I'm at all diligent about using Bing. And when I bring that up to my nieces, they like laugh at this. And I'm like, you're laughing at $150 for doing the same thing, right? And Google does nothing like that. And I think that this will change. Google at some point will have to have some kind of return of value. But what are your thoughts about that as a business model?
Well, I'm of two minds there. I think, first of all, Google is monetizing you no matter what, right?
Right.
They're using your data and your browsing habits to sell that information to advertisers and to companies, right? So they're doing that. We all know that, or we should all know that by this point. So on the Bing side, I guess at least if, obviously they're doing the same thing, but at least they're paying you a little bit for it. So I guess that makes a little more sense. But
Right.
my third thought is I want to get to a browser where none of that is happening, and
Right.
that's where Web3 comes in, where you can have a decentralized, web experience where you control what data is shared with people, and maybe you have different wallets for different purposes. And this is an address that I have that I don't mind sharing with a lot of people, but this address I have is very secure. And so and you don't have that option right now. There's no
Right.
optionality of like
Right.
fine tuning how I go about doing stuff on the internet. And that's one of the things that I think is coming. But it's a tough haul because it's a decentralized. You have to decentralize
Mhm.
everything, and sometimes centralization is convenient and makes it easier. But I think
Yeah.
people are diligently working on that, and that's something that I'm excited about.
There's also an energy in that the people that make this money already with a centralized currency are not willingly going to say, "Oh yeah, no problem." Like they want to have control. They want that revenue stream. They want to expand that revenue stream. So there's also that tension that we have to overcome, and with that comes access to big. I hate to say big media, but bigger things where they have a lot of influence on influence.
Yeah, and that's why I think like central bank digital currencies are such a problem. I think I don't want the government knowing where my money is going,
Mhm.
and that's exactly what would happen if you've got a blockchain based, digital coin that's controlled by the Fed. Say
Mhm.
China's doing that, and it's obvious why they're doing it there. They want to control everything in China. I don't want to go that route at all. I do want a stable coin, like I was saying before. I do want.
Yeah.
I think the dollar should go digital, but I think it somehow needs to be in a private public partnership or something where there's trust there, or maybe zero knowledge proofs can come in here and allow for this, but that also block any sort of tracking or any sort of record of where my money is going. So um, again, there's the digital dollar project here in the United States. I know Christian Carlo, he's a former
Yeah.
CFTC chairman. He's heading that up. They're working on this stuff, and so again, I think it's. I hate this cliche so much, but it's still early. I've been hearing that for 7 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it still seems that way. But like you said before, I think the potential is quite obvious.
Yeah, and just for frame of reference, I was thinking about this, and I know you'll remember this. I was in Iraq in 2004, and I was talking to an Iraqi guy who worked with me as an engineer. This guy's trained in England to be an engineer, so he knows his stuff. And he looks at me and says, Pete, cars will never drive themselves." And literally the next day, DARPA's like, "We just had our first successful car self-driving competition," right? And
Uh,
yet, if you remember the video, like the car's like, "Uh-oh, bail, hail," and then it would like try to figure out what to do, and these cars were going super, super slow. Now on actual live streets, and we're not there yet, but it took about 20 years to have virtual taxis. We're still in the testing phase, but it's advancing, right? And so
yeah.
a very similar timeline for crypto and all of the features and functions that it does. And there are a lot of people that don't use any kind of, we'll say, fiat currency, and they're able to avoid it because these other better solutions exist.
Yeah, and I think underline that point, I saw the other day that it's an estimate that there's 3 million active crypto wallets right now in use. So 3 million people
Yeah.
are actively, in the crypto space on a maybe daily basis or something, whatever active means. And that's obviously a drop in the bucket.
Right.
So, as someone who's kind of like staked my career on this, I'm happy to be early, and I like being on the forefront of this. It makes it really interesting, but it's also challenging to try to separate the wheat from the chaff, and
Yeah.
figure out
Yeah.
like what is the next thing, or what is something that's
Oh, yeah.
maybe hype, which is a whole nother topic.
Yeah, yeah, the wheat and the chaff, and sometimes the chaff turns into a fuel that you can burn and becomes billions of dollars, So there's also stuff in that chaff that you might be able to make. I'm fascinated by the concept of the motion of money. Like we think that Elon Musk hoards all this money. And in fact, he probably doesn't have that much liquid capital around him at all. It's all out doing something. And even if you have liquid capital, that money's actually probably not at your fingertips ready to go. I mean, other than the change in your jar and a couple of bucks in your ashtray, you have very little money that's sitting still. And even that money that's sitting still is probably outside of your ashtray doing things, just on the assumption that it's out there. So money is just whipping around and always moving. And I think what people don't realize, and this is just Pete saying this, what cryptocurrencies do is they make a smarter flow of money from here to the 5,000 places it's going to go. And it never stops, right? And it turns into euros and it turns into yen, and then it, moves all around. What are your thoughts on the motion of money?
Yeah, one thing that I went through the financial crisis as a reporter at Bloomberg News, and the thing that shocked me, that I had not realized before that, was that basically the entire world works on borrowed money. Nobody's using their own capital for anything.
Right.
And when that borrowing cycle ground to a halt, like when people were talking about commercial paper was dropping like a rock, and some of the money market funds were close to breaking a buck, which was never supposed to happen because nobody wanted to lend anymore, and the lending was what kept the whole thing going. It was like
Right.
plates spinning on poles, right? And so
Yeah.
that's when things got really serious, and the Fed decided to step in and basically take any asset you had and basically almost give you 100%, as collateral to just like get money into the system. So that fascinated me, and I think crypto is proven to be no different. Like when you've got 3 Arrows Capital like going down because they were over leveraged, like I don't know, what was a couple $1 billion,
Yeah.
and it's just loans against loans against loans. That's I guess it shouldn't surprise me, but I guess I think what a lot of people are hoping for is that there's an alternative here, where now the phrase is, not your keys, not your coins, right? If you don't hold
Mhm.
the key to your own private wallet, then you might as well just kiss your crypto goodbye, because you could have it at FTX, or you could have it at Mt. Gox or whatever. And so there is there is the possibility here to have more control than we've ever had over our own capital and our own finances. Because you know my money's sitting at Citibank. Like if they wanted to shut me off, they could, and I
They could.
don't have any recourse there.
Yeah.
I have an ATM card. That's it. And so
Yeah.
this is different. If I've got an Ethereum wallet, that's mine, unless I lose my key or something, I'm in control of that. So
Mhm.
I find that I find that fascinating and heartening, and also like a little. So then when in the Web3 world or the crypto world, like you see the patterns that we've seen in traditional finance repeating, it sort of
Hmm.
it bums me out a little bit. But again, it's like those people with dollar signs in their eyes. They're just chasing a fast buck. And I
Yeah.
think, people are always going to do that. Let's be honest, like that's just human nature, and people want to get
Right.
rich quick. But at least there is the potential there for doing things differently, if you're prudent and you want to just like be in control of your own money.
The control of your own money, is that the best thing? There's a lot of people that are pretty bad at money.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would like it. I would like to see this come where there maybe is something like FDIC insurance, or the government
Mhm.
kind of can step in and say, yeah, well, because money is going digital. Like you mentioned, it's electronic right now, and there's a difference between electronic and digital. Digital to me means instantaneous. It's within seconds that a transaction is confirmed and closed. Electronic goes back to like, why does it take 3 days for a check to clear? It's because Citibank has to, has to square its books with Bank of America's books, so that check, leaves one and enters the other, and it takes time, and it's kind of antiquated and very 20th century. I remember the times when my mom, to get cash before ATMs, she'd go down to the local liquor store and they'd cash checks for her, and like, so it feels like that, and that was in the 70s. So it feels like the banking system in that regard hasn't really improved that much. So, I forgot my point here, but I'm hoping that I think, my point, yeah, like money is going digital. I think there's no stopping it. So let's just
Right.
get on with it, and like, let's let the government realize that that's the case, and let's get some protections in there and get some of the infrastructure that's supporting the fiat world into the digital asset world.
Yeah, you talked earlier about being shut out of your own money. We've seen that happen with PayPal, really Patreon. Where they jump in, you're like, "Hey, build a business with us," and then they yank it away from you because you disagree with them politically, which is it's like the almost opposite. That's the antithesis of freedom. It's like I'm allowed to think these things, and by the way, these people aren't promoting anything horrible, and even if they were, they can build an audience, they get to do it. So you have these access to things that's yanked away by a system, to include Citibank. I mean, they will come in and shut your account down, or say oops, and then there are always people trying to steal, right? They're trying to find an angle to get money, and that of course creates security, which creates control, which leads us back to the same spot a lot of times. Are we just creating another cycle of the same thing? You talked about the same patterns happening. Will we end up about where we started with just a lot more options?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Mm.
What I've always said to people is, crypto, to me, is not there to take down the dollar. It's not there to replace the dollar as the global currency, the reserve currency. It's not there to take down Wall Street. It's there to provide an alternative to those things. And I think the people who've been around for a while now, and who are building things, will agree with me that this was never meant to, like, just take over the current world. It was meant to be an alternative for people who wanted to have more control over their
Yeah.
privacy, their private data, more control over their actual money. They wanted to have different systems where middlemen weren't taking 30% out of every transaction, like Apple, the iTunes store, or the Apple store, takes 30% of everything that an app makes.
Yeah.
There's tons of other examples here. You could go point, I wrote about in my book, to the way Russia, was using Facebook and other social media platforms to sway the 2016 election. Those are things that, like, centralized platforms, can be abused, and that they're doing it for profit. They're doing it for clicks and eyeballs. And Web3 kind of presents, at least in theory, a nice alternative to that system. And so I think that's where my belief lies, with the potential here.
It requires a certain amount of people to make these things work and start to scale and create demand for more coins, more options, more services. We look at something. Well, you talked earlier about 3 million wallets, right? And you might have 2 wallets that are inactive because you started them. You're like, that's not working for me. And you do something else, or you lose the key. And you're like, so there's a lot of probably unused wallets. If you take that over to like Tesla, if you leave California and you leave New York and you drive through the middle of the country, you're not going to find nearly as many Teslas or any kind of hybrid cars at all, right? Especially in places where logistically it doesn't make sense. In big old Texas, a lot of the place you need a truck with that extra gas tank because you are your own provisioning in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So how do we, with all of this negative thing, with all the fear, you talked about you're early in this space. I believe I'm pretty early in this space, but we also enter that knowing that there's risk and there's volatility, but you have to be able to withstand that to be early and reap the rewards of being ahead of everybody else.
Yeah. I guess I think of it, a similar revolution was the internet and how it made everything so much more efficient, and connected the world. I think crypto has that same potential, but the difference is in the internet era, you didn't really have an option to invest into that technology. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you might have been able to maybe get in on an IPO or something, but you couldn't invest in the TCP, ICP
Right.
layer. You couldn't invest in the infrastructure. In crypto, you can. You can buy Ether as a play of thinking this is what is undergirding all of the stuff that we're talking about. Or if you think it's Solana, you can buy Sol, or if it's Avalanche, and that's what is fascinating to me about this. The way this is built is that it's got money loaded into this
Mm-hmm.
technology. So it's not just allowing you to do things. There's also
Mm-hmm.
a money and an investable element to it. So I think if people could understand that and sort of see it in the long term vision of like, oh yeah, maybe I should buy some Ethereum, or I should buy Bitcoin just because it seems like a good investment. I think, and I'm saying not get into the crazy stuff. Like, don't go try to get 20% yield at some place that's in the
Mm-hmm.
Bahamas. But I think I think that's a good pitch for people. Is like, look, this is y- you should allocate a little bit of your portfolio or a little bit of your money that you have
Right.
into these assets, and just
Yeah.
just sit on them, and do it. Put
Yeah.
put a little in a month per month, whatever it is, and then over time, I hope that people will get comfortable with that. And I think that's a nice entry point. And if you explain it to folks that way, I think it makes sense to them, as like, because nobody knew which of the internet companies were going to survive or
Mm-hmm.
thrive. A lot of them, in the early '90s, they or late '90s, they went away, but the ones that survived are now, multi-billion-dollar companies. So the interesting thing to me with like Ethereum or Solana or Avalanche is that that's a bet on the whole ecosystem. You're not like saying pets.com is going to
Sure.
revolutionize, pet food stores.
Sure.
You're saying this is the underlying layer here, and I believe in it, and I think it's going to go up in value. So I think that's something that makes sense to me,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise, like, a lot of these things are hard to use, and the UI, still the interface of the user interface is really a bit clunky and can be scary for a lot of people. So I think
Right.
just sort of getting people used to having a digital wallet, learning how to go onto an exchange, get your stuff, and then put it into your digital wallet. I think that we should kind of be remaining at a basic level for a lot of folks, and so
Mm-hmm.
that to me makes sense.
Yeah, the things. Where do you spend it? And a lot of this money you don't necessarily have to spend. It's doing something for you in the blind. And the other thing is, by owning some of these coins, you get forked money, where you have like this money. I guess we'll say it splits. It forks, and so
Hmm.
now there's two pockets of this money that you have, and then you get airdrop something that is built off of Ethereum, because they're trying to stimulate and prime the pump. And so there's a lot of other benefits, that potential benefits, that are out there when you own something like Ethereum or EOS or whatever it's going to be. There are other things that happen that are, some form of dividend, but and they don't all work out. But if you hold them for 10, 20 years, it's like the whole thing with Coke, right? Like if you would have bought Coke in 1938, you'd be a bazillionaire.
Yeah.
But if you bought RC Cola, you still would have made a lot of millions and millions of dollars. This is a company that made a lot of money. So you don't have to smash the home run to hit a home run.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I wouldn't. Uh, yeah, I don't want to tell people, what to do with their money or give
Yeah.
financial advice, but I definitely think that's my pitch to people is just buy these things and hold them, see what happens. Use a little bit of your money, not more that'll get you in trouble if it goes down, because it is volatile. But again, I think it's a good long term play.
Right. And I've got a friend who works at Edward Jones. That's about as respected as you can get. And he's like, yeah, take some money and invest it in that part of thing. I'm not going to do that. We're looking at it. When we have a product, I'll let you know. But for right now, yeah, just go dabble in it and see what you can do. And it's so this is a guy who makes people money with money for a living. And he's not shying away from it. He's saying, don't just do that. Don't be,
Hmm.
whatever's blacker than black in investment. That's probably where you're at in crypto. But invest in these. As one thing is mutual funds. You go invest in a solid mutual fund, then you can take a little bit and play with it, and just here's $20 a week that I'm going to put into crypto, Ethereum, whatever it's going, whatever model you're going to do. There's a reasonable and a serious approach to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's talk about your book real quick, because now we talked about this. We have these cataclysmic events that we've been talking about, and you chronicle one in your book. And I'm just everybody look on the thing below. You'll see the link for the book, and I'm going to put it in the chat notes right now. So if you guys go over there, you'll be able to buy it. And it's available on Audible, and that's what I do. So maybe that'll be a good reason just to listen to something about the hazards of it. But here's also a guy who writes about this hazard and this cataclysmic thing, and he's saying you can have a reasonable approach to investing in crypto. So I'll shut up and let Matt talk.
Well, yeah. What would you like to know about the book? You want to talk about the DAO?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So this was, for Ethereum at least, this was the first big sort of crisis moment. There had been crisis moments in Bitcoin, like with Mt. Gox and some other things prior to that. But Ethereum was less than a year old when the DAO was hacked, and about $55 million was stolen. So I'll try to give you the high level short version, and then if you want to ask questions, like we could go deeper. But so what everyone needed in Ethereum at this point, so it launched in 2015, went public, and now you've got the Ethereum blockchain. It's a system where you can write smart contracts, which are pieces of code that then live on top of the blockchain. So you can do a lot more than you could with the Bitcoin blockchain, which is basically you could just send value from A to B. With Ethereum, you can write a contract to create a decentralized exchange, or you can write a contract to create a non-fungible token, something that's digitally scarce, which didn't exist before. So it opened up all this new potential. And there were a whole bunch of teams out there in the world that wanted to build things and applications, but they needed money. Just like any startup, any business you want to start, you need money, right? So somebody had the idea, this guy, Christoph Jentz, and these guys at Slockit, which was a German company, they had the idea, they needed money too. So they're like, well, everybody needs money. So why don't we create like a digital or a virtual, it's basically like a venture capital fund. They sold DAO tokens. DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. It's a big scary word, but it's basically just it's an organization that is basically managed by smart contracts. So it's all code, it's computerized, and everything is sort of determined by the code. So they sold DAO tokens for Ether, and you collected this big bucket of Ether, and then you had your DAO tokens. And the idea was startups would come to the DAO members and say, hey, here's my idea. I want to create a decentralized, competitor to Uber, called whatever, Carcoin or something. So then if the people who held the DAO tokens liked your idea, they would vote, and you would then get some of the money to go off and develop your project. So it's basically that's pretty much very similar to venture capital, but it was sort of like opened up and democratized. They thought they maybe would get $10 to $15 million in Ether into the fund to do this. Turned out they got $150 million in just over something like 6 weeks. Because honestly, at the time, there wasn't really much else to do with your Ether. Like, it was so new, and there wasn't really anything else going on. So everybody kind of bought DAO tokens, and it was like a very hot thing. It ended up pushing the price of Ether to a record high at that time. So the funding period closes. They've got 150 million. Then because it's Ether and it moves up and down in price, the price keeps going up. So eventually, in a few weeks, it's now got $250 million worth of Ether in it. It's like $250 million. And that's when it's hacked. And somebody found a backdoor into the DAO code, and they made an exploit that basically just started draining out everyone's money. And the thing about blockchain and smart contracts is you can't really change the code once it's activated. It's difficult. It takes weeks. It takes a lot of consensus and updates and things like that. It's not like there's a switch you can flip and just it goes off. So people just had to watch their money fly out the window. And so luckily for them, the contract that the hacker used broke after about, I don't know, it's like 20 hours or something. And that's, in that 20 hours, he got the $55 million. But it was a huge crisis for the community. It was big test for how people wanted Ethereum. Like, what was Ethereum about? Because they had choices to make now, because you could blacklist the hacker, you could try to blacklist the money that was stolen, or you could go back and change the history of the blockchain so that the hack never occurred, which is a very taboo thing in blockchain, because it's supposed to be, once a transaction is there and it's settled, it's final. You're not supposed to be able to go back and reverse anything. So they ended up voting on it, basically by choosing to upgrade Ethereum to change the history of the blockchain, so that hack it was as though it never happened. They didn't change other transactions that had happened in the meantime, but just that one DAO contract, they fixed it. They fixed the bug and basically made it so that if you held DAO tokens, you could now send the DAO tokens to that contract and get your Ether back. So that's a very high level, quick overview of it. I go into a lot more detail in the book, and there's a lot more twists and turns. But they basically survived that and kind of came out on the other side. And I think they proved, and Vitalik Buterin has said this, that they want it to be changeable. They want it to be something. They want Ethereum not to be static, because I think people realize the business world doesn't like things that are irreversible. Like, they don't like mistakes happen. So that's something I think that they came out with. And I think in the long run, at the time, it was very contentious, and a lot of people were very upset about it. But I think, in my opinion, in the long term, I think it was good for Ethereum that they showed that they could be flexible. And, so that's kind of like the takeaway. But there's a ton more in my book. It's also about, Vitalik Buterin and how he gathered the people around him who made Ethereum real. And it's really a history of the early days from how it all began. So the DAO is a part of it, but there's a lot more too in the book.
And there's also a lesson in that Ethereum is worth more now than it was during that height, if I remember correctly. And so you look at these things, it's this massive thing. Is it even against the law, that hack, to take $55 million out? Or is that fair play because the code is there and there's no backdoors till you make one,
Yeah, that's a great question. And I tried to address that in the book. I talked to some folks that I knew who had experience at like the DOJ, prosecuting some, digital, like blockchain related heists and things. And they said to me, jurisdiction is one issue. Like, where's the jurisdiction? This is a code that exists on a blockchain, and it's not. Ethereum doesn't have like a headquarters, I mean, like the Ethereum Foundation does, but they didn't have anything to do with this. So it's like, what's the jurisdiction? Okay. And then you get into the very sticky question of like, okay, well, this guy or person or whoever exploited a bug in the code, and did, so you have to get into that. And, with a jury, I think that could be really tricky. And I don't think prosecutors like to, go into situations where they're not really confident that they can get a conviction. Thirdly, I think at that point anyway, back in 2016, the forensics technology was very bad. It almost didn't exist. So the tracking, like where that money went and how it was used, after it was stolen, would be very difficult. I think it's gotten a lot better today, and I think they have made some. There's been other books out after mine that have said, here's the person who did it, because the forensic technology improved to the point where you could trace the money to an account and then link it with other things so that they could kind of triangulate. But yeah, I mean, whether it's a crime or not, like, it raises a question of what happened with Tornado Cash, right? That's a piece of code, and that's a piece of software that the government has said is illegal, no matter what you're using it for. So I find that really disturbing, because, there are lots of things that are legal that can be used in illegal ways or in damaging ways. So, that's a great question. And I think that's another area that's really interesting to keep an eye on, is how the law and regulation is going to adapt and evolve to take into consideration maybe I am interacting with a smart contract and a piece of code on a blockchain. Like, is that a counterparty? Like,
Mhm.
what am I owed? What kind of like due diligence do
Yeah.
I have in that situation? Or what's my fiduciary duty? Or like, who, if that code is bad, do we go after the developer? Or like, like there's all sorts of
Yeah.
questions that are very interesting and can be really sticky when you think about it.
When you look at how we transfer ownership of a home here in the US, it's different than other places. And so you have to look back in time to see if you actually own this thing you've lived in for 30, 35, 40, 50 years. You believe you own it, but if something happens to your title, then so you have to, that's why you have to check, right? And this is sort of a distributed ledger of sorts, right? But it's not distributed in this case. And so you go back and you pay someone to do a title search, and you find out, oh, actually, someone else is claiming and actually has legally acquired the rights to your house. This can happen, and so you have this thing where did they steal it or did you not protect it? If you leave your asset out where people can grab it, if you left a bag of money on the street, you can't be like, they shouldn't have taken that, like, well, they did, and it's not against the law, because it's
Yeah.
there. And so it's not as straightforward as that, but that is sort of what we're looking at. It's like, hey, you guys wrote code. You said that this, was safe. And so I found a way to get in. And if nothing else, I'm glad to give back the money, but at a significant fee because I showed you where you were wrong. And there's someone who's going to invest their time, lots of time, into cracking whatever is uncrackable.
Yeah, and the irony with the DAO back then was they had like people had found a lot of other bugs and a lot of other security problems with it, and there
Mhm.
was a call right before it went live to like put a moratorium on it. We like they were saying, pretty prominent computer scientists in the space were saying, look, there's too many vulnerabilities here,
Yeah.
but people kind of just didn't take heed because I think everybody wanted it to work and everybody wanted it to succeed, and pretty much everyone in the community had bought into it at that point. So, and then yeah, your title search thing. Anybody who's bought a house, like that's the biggest scam in the world. Like I understand, like you're saying, maybe 1 in 1,000 times, like there's a problem with the title, but mostly it's just
Yeah.
totally normal, and you're paying hundreds of dollars for somebody to basically
Yeah.
just pull out a piece of paper and say, yeah, this is good. So
There's no
that
other piece of paper in this folder.
yeah, and that's a great use for a blockchain, in my opinion. That we're not anywhere near that
That's
yet.
happening. That's actually happening now where
It is, but it's going to
put it
take
on.
forever because
Uh,
if you realize like how the real estate market works in this country, that's county by county, and
mhm.
those are all paper records.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's like
And a lot of the,
pieces of paper in folders in the county clerk's office where that have to be digitized and then put onto a
right.
blockchain. That's going to take forever.
And that is not what those folks do. These are folks in every county in the nation. And yeah, they have a file cabinet. It's like,
Yeah.
they pull it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great. And title insurance too. Oh my gosh. Here's another part of this
Mhm.
thing where it should be and is becoming digitized. And yeah, anyhow, so let's not get distracted by that. And I do want to get into your company, but I wanted to ask you this because I've been doing this for quite a while, not at your depth, not with your frequency, but quite a while. So I've been exposed to a lot of these concepts. And I remember the ICO era, and well, who knows what happened to that. Do you think you know anything about cryptocurrency and the whole Web3 world yet at all? Because it just explodes all the time. New things, new people,
Yeah,
new
no,
ideas.
I'm laughing because I actually do have that feeling
Yeah.
every so often where I'm just like, God, I know a drop in the bucket here, and it's so like, and also, for a long time as a reporter at Bloomberg, I, ethically, I wasn't allowed to really use crypto,
Mm,
or own it, or, I had a little bit so that I could understand how it worked and things like that, just because I wrote about it. But, to really be in there, I think you should be experimenting with like DeFi protocols and things where you can yield farm or loan out your
mhm.
crypto and things. I've never really been that way because I'm more of a writer and a reporter, and I can talk to people, understand it, and then they'll explain it to me. And so I think that's one thing where I kind of still am old fashioned, where I think like reporters need to have a little bit of distance from their subject matter. Like you can't cover Microsoft as a company if you own Microsoft shares, in my opinion. There's a conflict
Yeah.
of interest there,
Yeah.
because you might have access to information that's going to change the price of that share, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's one thing that's held me back a little bit, but also it's just that, like you said, like the sheer volume of it and the sheer kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the pace that it moves at is amazing. And and so yeah, just trying to keep up with that is a full-time job.
I got to bring up another aspect of this that was really troublesome to me was you have, and I'm going to be an old man here for a minute, so apologies to everybody. But when I go sit in front of someone who's very, very, very young, super smart, understands things. They're high as fuck when I get there in a house full of weed and all kinds of people moving around. Like what is going on here? That an adult does not live like this, right? And this person's got all of this knowledge and they're making money and they're influencing other people to invest in things. And I think, okay, maybe what they're doing makes sense and maybe they're smart enough to make the machine work. But I don't see, I'm going to be super judgy here. I don't see an ounce of character. I don't see your ethical, floor that they're working from. I see people that are, and again, I'm going to be very unfair here, instant gratification people who don't seem to hold themselves to a higher standard as they lead this part of the industry. I see a lot of questionable things. Like when you go to drive around San Francisco and I would do a show or I do odd jobs. I do a lot of handyman work. And I'm like, you have an open bar 24/7 in your business.
Mhm.
Like we all know where this goes. This all ends up in a bad place, right? So I just want to, what are your thoughts on that? And you don't have to get into that. And we're definitely going to talk about your company next. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I definitely have thoughts on that because I started my career as a reporter covering Wall Street, where you're dealing with other people's money, and that's a very serious thing. And there are tons of regulations and requirements and testing, and that those guys have to go through, for different licenses, and they have, in a lot of cases, they're on the hook as a fiduciary to their clients, and so it's all taken, very seriously. And I think that's
Mhm.
really important, because it's this is other people's money, and it might be their life savings, in many cases. And so I want to see that come over to crypto, to where projects or protocols have that same approach, and understand that this isn't like rugging someone isn't cool, like shilling and you know outright fraud, should have
Yeah.
no place here. And like it's not a joke, and this is like
Yeah.
people's money. And I think, if I had to guess, I would say a lot of these folks, um, I think the type you describe probably got in early and were lucky and made so much money that they just are like, they're kind of like drunk with it or whatever, and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem real to them that they could be multimillionaires on paper because, they got in at some point. And I know a lot of people who bought ether at 30 cents, or they were in on Bitcoin
Yeah.
when it was a couple $100s. And it's crazy, and they're, rich beyond their wildest dreams, and they might be not even 30 years old,
Yeah.
and so that's where I would like to see more responsibility and care,
Yeah.
because other people want to emulate them, but you have to understand that uh, people might be putting everything they have into this, and you have to treat that with
Right.
the care and respect that entails.
Yeah. I think about the Wright brothers who did something incredible, but they also were the guys that caused the first airplane crash. And they also were probably the first fatality in an airplane crash by the pilot, And so you have these things where you look at your business, and it's very common in the Silicon world to see the positive utopic kind of view. And you're like, yeah, but where's the nasty side? And what are you doing to prevent that? Where's the code that, and they seem to struggle with that because you can build a machine and you can say this machine's the best thing ever and put a human life into it. But then all of a sudden you realize, oh man, we used baling wire instead of, some other proper thing. So there's definitely a sense of that. But let's get past that. Let's talk about now. Okay. So DeCential, is that what we're calling this thing? 'Cause I didn't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, DeCential. like
DeCential.
DeCential.
Okay.
Yeah, like
DeCential.
decentralized and essential put together.
Right. So you make your move away from the Bloombergs and you're like, I'm going to do this myself.
Yeah, kind of. I think it came from my book, because my book had been out for a little while, and this documentary filmmaker named Neil Berkeley approached me and wanted to option my book to make it into a documentary. And we started talking, and I looked up his films, and he had done several amazing, great documentaries. One on Gilbert Gottfried that really moved me, and I realized that like we kind of approach things in a similar way where we use characters to tell a story, so that's the approach I took in my book, because I knew it was a complicated subject. So if I could tell you a story about the people, then I can kind of bring you along and tell you about the technology at the same time. So Neil does that in the same way, just in film. And so we started talking, and kind of hit it off, and we realized that we thought that the people and the characters that are in the Web3 crypto world just weren't, we thought, getting enough attention. Like there are places that will talk about the people, but a lot of it's just more tech focused, or you listen to podcasts and they jump right into the technology of like what is a ZK snark or whatever, and it's never about like, who are you as a person, and where did you come from, and why do you find this, why are you devoting your life to it? So we thought that a company that sort of made that its focus was something that didn't quite exist. So we sort of just hashed it out, and we went live in, I think, October of 2021. So we just had our 1-year anniversary a couple months ago. So we're doing podcasts. We're doing the website is full of stories about folks all over the world. I've got writers in Singapore, in Dubai, in London, in New York, and here in LA. So we're getting a really nice mix of stories that I think you don't really get anywhere else. And it's just really like, working on just really telling the stories of these people. Because the thing about crypto, you probably know, Pete, is you talk to these folks that are in it, and they're fascinating, they're weird, they're funny, they're usually really smart, they're usually quite altruistic, and genuinely want to change the world in some way. So I love people like that. They make great characters and great subjects. So we're working on that, and just we're putting out some films on the film side. We've got the podcast, we've got editorial. We're working on building up our news division, especially kind of in the bear market. We've realized that people want news, I think, more than maybe profiles of folks. But I think once the bear market turns, and we bring new people in, I think they're going to want to see, like, they're going to want to get a sense of like who these folks are. And that's what we're providing. And I think, like I said before, if I can tell you a story about a person that really like brings you in and entices you, then I'm going to be able to tell you, like, here's how an NFT works, or, this is how a decentralized exchange works. And it's all kind of wrapped up in the person, rather than putting the technology forward as a kind of primary thing.
It's so interesting. And I think about the NFT, and it's easy to dismiss NFTs as being like, it's just a JPEG, but, so is a Van Gogh, and it wasn't worth shit to him when he was alive. It's worth a lot now. But is that because of a cult of personality? Like, we love Led Zeppelin, but it also gets played the most. And so is it really the best rock band ever? I don't know, and it's a lot of it is the cultural aspect of this. And so when you look at the person, I think I totally agree with you. One of the things I try to do, and we didn't spend a lot of time talking about your company, because I want people to be fascinated by you, because you should always be at least in front of, if not bigger than, the thing you build. Now, maybe eventually, your company will become much bigger than you. But you think about Elon Musk and Tesla, there's a nice balance there where like Tesla's ubiquitous and so is Elon Musk. And it makes that person forever fascinating. And I think we had on Propping the Bubble, we had a guy named Miko Matsumura on the show. And there are a lot of Miko Matsumuras out in the tech world, especially on the blockchain side, who you say have these unique and incredible views of things, because they've come at it from such an oblique that we're just not ready for it. And Miko said something that I use all the time. He's like, never bet against software developers, because they're going to find a connection between two separate things. And they're never going to stop doing that. They're never going to stop closing these gaps and weaving this web. And so you can say, Teslas are never going to self-drive. Well, shit, man, you're wrong, because here it is. It's coming, right? And is it what we think it's going to be? No. And it usually ends up being something more incredible anyhow. So I love that you guys are doing this. And is this like is it a Substack? How does it work operationally? Do you subscribe to it? How do you get access to these stories?
No, it's a website. It's all free right now. We have a weekly newsletter you can subscribe to where we pull together some of the most interesting stories from other publications. So we kind of send it out to folks, and we add in a couple of our stories or podcasts to that. So yeah, it's all free right now. We're just starting to, we're trying to get our legs under us, build our viewership so that, we don't even have ads yet. So we're lucky enough to go through a seed round of fundraising in the summer, right before everything crashed. So we're just hoping to kind of parlay that into, kind of just expanding and creating more content and hopefully, hitting that niche where people, can learn about the people that are making all this stuff that we're talking about a reality.
Yeah, yeah. One of my cues for a good investment is when someone from like Chevrolet, there's one of the old heads there, it's about 7 years ago, says, "Where's the special sauce at a Tesla?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you're not supposed to see that." And so that's a cue to me to acquire Tesla or to pay attention to these companies, that are coming out and getting backed. And there's a lot of that kind of thing. So when we see people poo-pooing crypto as like, how do you spend it and everything else, they just don't understand what it is and haven't been in the space. And that's a hint to get to a site like yours to start learning and finding these people. And you don't have to make big bets at the level these guys are starting at to say, hey, I like what this person is doing and what their vision is. Let me throw $100 at this, and maybe it goes somewhere.
Yeah, and that brings up another thing about the people who dismiss crypto as a Ponzi scheme, or they just think it has no value. It, to me, that does a great disservice to all these people who are actually building it and are devoting their lives to it. And that was something that I wanted to highlight because, you know, it was mostly through my book that I really got to know a lot of these people well, where I realized, these are fascinating, really good
Mhm.
people, and they're really smart and they're really ahead of the curve here.
Yeah.
And to say that all of this is a scam and it's like has no value and it should be at zero, like it's a slap in the face to these folks that I find really inspiring. And so
Yeah.
that was something that motivated me to want to put them forward more into the press and into the public space here, because a lot of times these folks, and this has been really interesting when I get people on my podcast or I do features on folks, they'll say to me afterwards, like, I've never talked about that part of my life before, with anybody.
Mhm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I want to do here. I want people to come away from this, whether it's a podcast or a story on the site, that where they think like, I kind of know that person a little bit more, or, like funny stuff comes up. Like this one guy was, he was a kid on Sesame Street, or this one
No
guy,
kidding.
you just when you talk to people and you ask them about like what were you like as a kid or what did you like in school, the conversations, as you're an interviewer, they can go in great directions
Oh
and,
man.
and really
Yeah.
have, you can just really discover things about people.
As much as it's great to go to the wine countries, and I'm saying all of them because people's dreams are made there. Like they're like, I can sell wine, I can make wine, and they have this fantasy. You're talking to the same thing. You're talking to all these, and I use the regular, all of the founders in technology space, whether they're crypto or apps or whatever it is. They're doing something because they're like, I can build this thing and make a difference. And if we can't get behind those kind of stories, then what kind of assholes are we? We're the problem. And you're right. There are really beautiful people. Maybe they're too hippy dippy. Maybe they're too sharky, whatever it is. But you hear them talk about this thing and what they think it's going to do. We all have dreams like that. They're just doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally agree.
What when people go to decentralized decentral.io, what else are they going to find there? Like what's how much time do they need to spend on it? Someone who's like, I don't know what the hell these guys are talking about. How do they walk in and start somewhere? Because that can be, look, it can be imposing, right? Like you said, both of us feel like I can learn so much more about this. And so someone's like, all right, Pete, I'll take you up. I'll click on this link. But what's going to be at the website when they get there?
Yeah, so we are concentrating on a couple different areas where Web3 is intersecting with kind of the traditional world. We have a lot of content about Web3 and how it's changing music. So we've got some great writers who are, so if you're into music or a musician and you want to know how like NFTs and other kind of audience participation things are changing the way artists raise money to make their recordings. Like we've got a lot of great stories and podcasts on that. We've also got where Web3 is kind of intersecting with entertainment in Hollywood. So we have a great podcast called Lights, Camera, Crypto, where our host, Stephen Ladden, is interviewing folks in Hollywood, both on the kind of entertainment side, like the studio side, and then also the artists. Like he had a great interview with Julie Pacino, who's Al Pacino's daughter. She's a filmmaker and a photographer. She's using NFTs to like self-fund her projects, so she doesn't need to go to a financer or a film studio and ask for money.
Right.
She can do it on her own. I'm writing a lot about just Ethereum and the folks that I've gotten to know, like the builders, like the co-founders of Ethereum, like Vitalik and Griff Green and all sorts of folks like that. So that's more general. We've got really good coverage out of the Middle East. If you're interested in what's going on there, it's like Dubai and the United Arab Emirates is a really big hotspot for crypto right now that I don't think a lot of people realize.
Yeah.
And then we've got folks in like Singapore and Hong Kong that are covering that for the angles of what's going on over there. And so it's always a focus. We try to focus on people and try to tell characters or bring you a character and tell you their story so that we can then teach you about it. And so and just to let everybody know, the website is kind of basic right now, but we're almost like a couple days away from upgrading it to where it's going to be a lot more engaging and a lot more organized. So we're still, like I said, kind of getting our feet underneath us. But the next thing we're doing here is the website's going to look a lot more professional and hopefully engaging.
Yeah. Well, listen, I love what you're doing. It's exciting to me. And, we need more coverage on these things. I was talking to someone else who works in the technology PR space, and this person was saying they're very successful. Like no one is covering rounds of funding and these other background things. There's a market here for this. And I love to see you in there working to fill it, because there's so much richness. And oftentimes founders are so busy making their beautiful machine that they never tell anybody about it,
Yeah.
and guys like us, we try to change that for people. So everybody definitely go to the website, DeCential.io. Anything in closing before we wrap this thing up, Matt? And thanks, Biz. I know that I get rangy on these things, but like you guys are trying to do, I'm trying to reveal like your incredible experience and the connections that you've made, and the fact that you're not only just still doing it, but you're like, hey, I'm gonna double down on what I'm doing. I love all of that about what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pete. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, I just, check out the site, check out my book. There's so much out there to teach people about what, I think it's important for folks that want to get into this to know the history of it. And that's why I see my book being valuable, is you can learn about where did this all come from? Who are the people who actually made it back in 2014 and 15 and before that? So, yeah, the site's got a lot of stuff on it, and hopefully it appeals. We're trying to kind of capture the culture of this as well. Like this is a cultural movement as well as a technology movement. And I think if you think about it like that, DeCential is a real rare kind of site where the culture is really being represented in crypto. So if you're interested in that, have a look, and hopefully subscribe to the newsletter and do whatever, like just watch us on our journey, and hopefully we can take you along with us.
All right, hang on, stand by and I'll come right back to you. Thanks everybody for watching. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you